Budget and Finance Committee meeting will come to order on Monday, June 5th at 5 p.m. Let the record show that Alderman Linville and myself are present. We do not have a third member at the moment. Move for approval of the May minutes.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Passes 2-0. Is there any citizen comment? Seeing none, moving on to item number 1, discussion and presentation capital funding options, Cumberland Securities. John, if you could introduce yourself just for the record, and then the floor will be yours.
Yeah, my name is John Warner. I'm with Cumberland Securities.
Trent, do you have a presentation from
He
them?
does.
Good,
Yes,
good deal.
yeah. And I serve as the city's municipal advisor. Thank you so much for inviting me to come up and make this presentation. It was Pam and Deborah and I have had a lot of conversations about the upcoming capital projects that the city's been anticipating and the discussion of what does the funding look like. And let me go ahead and just say for the record that the amount of spreadsheets and data that I've received between Pam and Deborah have been unbelievable. And I started giggling because I started thinking, okay, now which spreadsheet do I look at first? But I finally reduced all that plus my own calculations down to what you have in front of you. And basically, it's not so much, well, it is kind of talk about what you're kind of anticipating right now, what you need to be able to do, but also how to do the funding as it pertains with being consistent with your debt management policy, and then also what other options you all may be considering, because I know you have more things to worry about other than just debt. So if you will look at your presentation, if you go to page 1, this is where the city of Spring Hill is right now as far as their debt is concerned. And it's broken down by the individual issues and that sort of thing. Yeah, and it's very nicely, the way it's been put together and the way you have that downward sloping curve, that's great because we've been able to take advantage of previous issues and refundings where we put more of a level principal, which reduces your interest expense, which kind of creates this very nice sloping, downward sloping debt service curve, okay? And then if you go to the second page, it talks about how the general fund supports the debt. You have, I broke it out into two pieces of debt. The general fund debt being all of your debt prior to 2020 when you passed the 1875 resolution to be able to fund specific projects for debt service. And that money has really pretty much gone for all of your projects from that point forward. So if you look at your general fund supported debt, and you can see it's really only 3 pieces, and it's very small, relatively speaking. And the dotted line above it, you have plenty of money to pay for it right now. There's not an issue with that at all. This is at 15%, which is what's consistent with your debt management policy. And I quit making the chart because if I had put the chart where the dollar amounts were projected to go, it would have made the bottom numbers, the numbers you would be looking at, very, very, very small. Exactly. So I just quit. Then if you go to page 3, same sort of thing, but these are funds that are allocated for specific capital projects as outlined when you pass the resolution for the 1875 resolution. And it is very level because the way that debt has changed or the way that interest rates have changed over time, it works a little bit better for the city at this time to have level debt, level principal and interest payments across the board. You do pay a little bit more interest over time, but in terms of being able to manage those dollars, and try to keep your debt the dollars you're spending towards debt lower today, it works a little bit better for that. So that's why it's very, very flat until some of the debt retires over time. And once again, the dotted line above it represents the money coming in from the 1875 fund allocated towards debt service. And once again, I quit doing the upper limit because with that alone, you're in great shape. So if you add the two together on page 4, you have just a little bit over $12 million if you use the full amount, the 15% of the general fund dollars that you can allocate towards debt service and 100% of the $1875. And like I said, you have plenty of room. Now, as we start looking towards your capital projects, we need to start paying attention to, okay, what do those restraints look like? And more importantly, as I was talking with Pam and Deborah, you all have so many other things that you need for the city to take into consideration. What happens if you actually reduce less than the full amount that's allocated? And that's what you will be seeing starting on page 5. And if I'm going too fast or if you have questions, please stop me along the way. On page 5, instead of starting off at 15% general fund dollars, we dropped it in half, and we used 7.5% of the 15% that's available, okay? And it's roughly a little bit over $3 million, plus 100% of the dollars available to pay for debt from the 1875 funds. If we were to issue 2 sets of bonds, one in 2023 for $25 million, and then another $25 million in 2025, this is kind of what the debt service would look like, and you're very, very close to meeting that maximum amount based on just those 2 issues alone, except for the year 2027, where you're going to have to draw some money from fund balance, or you might need to allocate more dollars from the general fund. And one other thing, the dollar amounts that I'm using here, you can see there's no growth on it. That dotted line represents what you're expecting in revenues starting for fiscal year 24. I did not anticipate any growth at all, just from a sheer sense of being conservative in our approach. And as I mentioned to the chairman, saying, oh, you'll just grow into your debt, don't worry about it, doesn't roll very well off my tongue, okay? So let's at least anticipate this. Now, of this chart, the only thing that I could possibly say is this works pretty good. And if you are able to maintain what you're expecting you're going to do in this upcoming budget year, with the exception of 2027, you're going to you'll be in good shape. What I do recommend is that as we go to the market and we're talking to the rating agencies and that sort of thing, you mention to them what your plan is. We want to avoid 2 things. We want to avoid moments, where all of a sudden the expenses are greater than the revenues and you think, oops, I didn't plan for that. That doesn't resonate well with rating agencies. The other one is for the legislative body to see that this is coming up and they don't have the political will to adjust revenues, either within the budget or trying to get additional resources. One of those 2. Those sort of things, those would hurt you with your rating.
Well, just to eyeball it, we're talking about what, maybe $400,000?
It's not much, no, sir. You're probably talking about $400,000. I'd have to go back and look at the actual spreadsheet.
And, excuse me, but while he has leveled this out at 24, we absolutely know the biggest amount of increase from construction already going, which means it's a guaranteed it's coming onto the books, is scheduled for 2025, not 2024. So I suspect that by 2027, that 7.5 and 100% will be, and I understand not wanting to grow into
No, exactly.
2025 is a property reappraisal year
as well.
Right.
So.
And what
think you're
Pam
both
just,
right.
and what Pam just got through saying is something that when we do the rating call for the first set of these 2 sets of bonds in 2023, that's the sort of thing we want to articulate, is that we see that there's a small blip on there, there's a possible blip here, but that blip is not really a blip because we will have some additional growth. And you just talk about more about the dynamics of how your revenue sources come in from the city.
Go ahead.
What is the actual dollar difference in the debt service numbers between where we're currently at for debt service funds and then 7.5% of the general fund? Are we looking at $5 million extra?
Something
per
about
year?
like that, yes, that's
Okay.
correct. Because right now, what you're paying in debt service is right at $6.5 million. And here, you would be paying a little bit over $8 million, 24 and 25. Your highest mark would be in 27 because that would be the first year you would have principal and interest payments. And it goes up just a little bit. It's like 9 3/4. So that's your difference.
Good deal. Thank you.
What, if anything, could we do legislatively now to communicate an intent in 27, knowing that the entire board is to face re-election between now and then? There's no guarantee any of us will be here.
Well, so what I would do is put a resolution together that is a capital financing plan and identify in a resolution your commitment to fund these projects over these times with these debt instruments resulting in these payments and whatever the needed revenues are to support
So
those
it
payments.
was Resolution 1940 that
Yeah,
created the 1875 fund.
yeah,
Really,
right. And do something
Do
along
something like that.
that. That's right.
for
We-
capital
we-
financing.
When the city approves their capital improvement plan, of course, it's non-binding.
Right.
But when you start saying this is our intent, and then you incorporate this as part of the resolution itself, it becomes crystal clear to what we talked about earlier. You're skating to where the puck is going.
Yeah. No, there's ways to undo 1940. They just
Absolutely. You just, yeah.
take some effort.
Yeah. So the one other thing I want to caution everybody about, particularly in light of who's in the audience tonight,
Talking about Tony.
yeah, Deb, the page 5 anticipates the 4 projects that we have under contract: Police Department Headquarters, Buckner Lane, the Interchange, Harvey Park Greenway. Oh, and 5, Countess Roundabout. It also presumes funding for Buckner Lane and Port Royal, Fire Station number 4, and then Port Royal Reserve Dekedron. Okay? That's all great, except these are all estimates. Well, Police Department Headquarters is not an estimate, and the
65 interchange.
change
not
is
as-
pretty solid. But our real question, what I do not want anybody to presume that we can go forward with, is Fire Station number 4 or any of those choice projects until we absolutely know the value and the cost of Buckner Lane, because we are under agreement to do that. And if that suddenly was out of our range of budget, we still have to do it. Now, there may be some timing choices we can make, and we might be able to play a little bit between north-south Buckner and south-south Buckner, which is all north of Duplex. But I think we've got to make sure that we keep our powder dry until we know those numbers. And then once we do that, then we can start making other plans.
Yeah. John, how would the markets, if they, to the extent that they might at all, kind of gauge how funds are going towards certain projects versus others? And the reason I ask, I mean, 1875 is a very restricted project list. Is there any kind of risk involved in them saying you spent the dollar on the wrong project?
No, absolutely not. The good news is this is all going to be general obligation backed. Backed by the full taxing authority of the city of Spring Hill. Now that's a real positive. You're not dependent on revenues from a athletic facility per se.
Correct.
Okay, or the success of a particular development.
Correct.
Okay, so those sort of things work out very, very well. Of course, in this area, the rating agencies, when they see capital improvement plans, they think schools. Well,
Yeah.
you're a city, and you don't have to worry about schools. So they're going to be perfectly understanding if you do something totally different than schools.
So there wouldn't be anybody who'd have any kind of standing to complain about how 1875 was going towards certain bond issuances and
No, I think we've got to be very careful that Fire Station number 4 is not in
and that's why I asked. The
It-
remodel of Fire
1980
Station 1 is an
right.
1875
However,
project.
you've got plenty of room. If you go back to page, if you go back to page 2, you've got plenty of room in the general fund to transfer money from the general fund or the adequate facilities fund to the capital projects fund to be able to support any debt taken for things that are not on 1875. And that's why we have set up the system the way we have, so we can individually track we can toe tag those dollars so that we know that 1875 is only doing what
Because
1870.
1940 does call for a sunset. When
Yes, when it's done. Now, you could amend 1875, but I think you run the risk of your taxpayers saying you lied to them. So I would rather see us keep those separate, particularly since we have the debt capacity to run an 1875 program and a capital projects program.
I mean, in its current condition, the 1875 debt goes out to 2042 anyways. It'd be the 2042 BOMA that lies to somebody.
And the other
Is it
thing
okay
too.
if I say at that point I don't care? Dead.
As we collaborate with your bond counsel, the other thing we can do as well is the wording in the resolutions, both in initial and the detailed, can be broad enough so that as priorities may change, or you see the emphasis of being able to allocate more dollars to another project because it's gotten bigger or the cost is more than it was, you can allocate those dollars. So you have a lot of flexibility within that as well, if that is a concern.
And that's been something that Cumberland has been great about helping us with bond counsel. They've given us a lot of flexibility. So as, you know, we've got $3 million we've got to spend in 2 months. Luckily, the resolution gives us the ability to do that. So it's not going to be a problem.
John, prior to the meeting, you were talking a little bit about short-term debt versus long-term debt and arbitraging some of that. Do you mind
Right.
repeating that so Alderman Linville can?
Well, it's unique that right now short-term rates are higher than long-term rates. A 1 month U.S. Treasury is around 5%. The 10-year handle on a AAA piece of credit for a general obligation bonds, 292. So with that kind of thought, blending that over time, you could probably have something that's more around maybe a 3 3/4, 4% rate blended across. Well, if you take that money, or if you're spending that money debt-wise and you put that into your debt fund, you can take those proceeds and invest it in short-term treasuries at 5%. And that difference is arbitrage, and it's legal, and it's, you know, but the thing is we need to work closely with staff because there are very specific spend down requirements that will keep you from having to do rebate calculations and have to return any of the excess proceeds, not up to your bond yield rate. So
And the short-term instruments wouldn't count as a spend down.
well, the thing is once you get let me back up here a little bit. Once you get the money in place, then of course you'll start spending on projects as quickly as you possibly can. The spend down has nothing to do with how you invest it. That's a totally separate decision, and we work with some people through Raymond James to help in those kinds of decisions on when to invest it, and also more importantly, how to time it so you can get the maximum return before you have to draw that money down. But if you do, the penalty is minimal.
So one of my, we went to the market at the right time for rates,
Yes.
but we're now in we got a spend mode. And the good news is we've issued, most of the contracts are going to get us there. So I'm not super worried about it. However, I want to make sure that anything we do coming into the future, we are anticipating spend down processes when we go to the market.
Well, 2020 is, that was not a financing issue. That was all about an execution issue, and it has nothing to do with anybody in City Hall. It had everything to do with contractors and supplies and the like, and COVID. That seemed to put a issue in there as well. So,
And just the state is not known for moving rapidly on anything to start with.
and you've tried, and you still are.
Yeah, we're working on it.
Do you want to finish out your last couple of slides?
Yes,
on
please.
deck?
On page 6, what we did now is instead of having 100% of available funds from 1875. We reduced it down to 80%. So we basically still have half of the funds available for the general fund and 80% of 1875 funds. And you can see that you have, with the line, all it does is just get reduced downward. You have significant issues of having to use fund balance. Now, this is a scenario that I don't think resonates well, even if you say it's planned with a rating agency, that is. They want to have revenues going in right at or close to debt service with maybe a year or two where you don't have enough revenues going in to fund projects. But that, I know that's something that may be discussed or being considered by some of the members of this board, and this is something they need to take into consideration. Okay?
I don't know that there's any value in ever holding on to 1875.
That's going to be my question. What's the value in holding on to those dollars?
$1 million doesn't do us any good in 1875. I mean, I think.
Talking $50 million projects. Hold on to $1 million bucks.
Yeah, I mean, I think the 100% makes sense. I'm a little concerned about 15% of general fund. I know that's the current debt rate, but our operational needs are so great. I'm a little concerned about that.
I like the idea that we're talking about 7.5. I mean, there's plenty of emergency movement in there.
Yeah.
And if the year, if that 1 year where you need to put a little extra money in, you've got it. You have it available as long as it hasn't been tied up in operations or something else. And also if you have growth, the other thing is that as well. And then finally on the last page.
Can I ask one quick
Yes,
question?
sir. Oh, sure can.
Is there any value in the board proactively saying, look, our debt plan is going to have us $500,000 over our recommended debt service in 2027, so we're going to go ahead and allocate those funds now to make sure that, does that have any value with the bond rating?
It really doesn't. I mean, even if we got to 27 and instead of 7.5% of the general fund, it went up to 8% that year. We're still well under 15%.
The only thing that you might want to consider, and that's because the counties have to do this, is a debt service fund. And it's allocated, and once those pennies go into it, you can't do anything with it. But see, that's how you set your tax rate, is based on money going into the debt service fund. One of the great things about being a local government like a city or a town in the state of Tennessee is you have an inordinate amount of flexibility. And with the revenues that you're expecting to be able to get, why not take advantage of that flexibility? And I like where you're going, and I think it's very sound financially, but I never want to handcuff my clients if I can avoid it, and I try to avoid it like the plague.
That makes sense. Thank you.
One of the things that we proposed last year that I would like to work towards is I would like to work towards creating a fund balance in all the appropriate places, that we have at least 1 year of debt service reserved everywhere we need it to be. So that means that in the beginning, instead of spending everything out of 1875, we hold on to it till it can make a debt payment on its own. And clearly we can do that already in general fund. I've actually been in cities that have been poor enough that we were mandated to do sinking funds.
Yes.
I don't know that we have to do that here, but the idea of setting money aside in a separate fund for that debt payment is not the worst management. It's like setting money aside for a vacation. You know where it is and you can have it. The good news about our new financial structure is that we can toe tag all those dollars, and if they need a new fund, we can create a new fund and hold on to it. I'd like to keep the flexibility of not having the debt service amount called out, because it gives us flexibility for other things, but I think it would be smart for us all to know what it is.
Yeah. Have a non-dedicated fund.
Yeah.
Yeah. And finally, on page 7, this is now looking a little bit even further, because when Pam and Deborah and I were talking about all the other projects, we were focusing on these 6, these 8. Well, then you've got another 7 that are still waiting to be funded sometime out in the future. So after we've done what we've just got through completing current debt service, 23 and 25 bond issues, then you've got, and again, this is just back of the envelope, 26, 27, and 28 at $25 million apiece, which, $75 million, because you have about $71 million worth of projects in what constitutes the library, the police training facility, Claiborne and Beechcroft, Kendron, the community service annex, the town center renovation, and Main Street widening. You can see that if you did 7.5%, even at 100% of the 1875 fund, you're nowhere near the funding you need to have there. Fortunately, that's far enough out into the future. We can now recalibrate based on what our new revenue growth is going to be, what the reassessment of the property values are going to look like, and how that all trickles down to the city. And remember, you think, well, we'll just bump up the general fund to 15% because you have so much money in it now. At today's dollars, that's only $3 million. So it's going to have to take a whole different relook. Yes, sir. If you went from 7.5% to 15%, you'd have a whole different look on what you need to be able to do revenue wise. And with any good luck and fortune, we'll be able to help you to do that.
I think it would be great for us to keep this slide right here updated so that we can always
Yes.
see what we've got in front of us
Yes.
so that we don't forget what all's on the table as we start to take on other ideas that other people are going to come up with beyond this list.
Yeah, there'll be new and different ideas, I'm sure. Y'all, I mean,
We
you're like so many other people in this area.
We don't
You're just
hurt for
growing.
need. Alderman Linville, what are you thinking, or you want me to take a stab at first? Next steps.
I have one other question that's kind of come to mind.
Mm-hmm.
My understanding before this meeting and for conversations that we've had the past couple of weeks has been that we were kind of at our max debt borrowing capacity. And obviously what we're seeing today is that we're far from it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is there, in your opinion, from a bond counsel perspective, is there value in essentially making sure that we have some capacity to borrow in case we experience where we're in a situation where a project overruns and we need to have essentially some borrowing capacity to fund that difference, right?
Absolutely.
Instead of actually going forward with these two issues, 2023 and 2025.
What would you go ahead?
I was going to say these two issues would still leave us 7.5% to
Sure.
be within our policy,
Yeah.
which would be $3 million.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is too, you currently have millions of dollars. I'm going to say probably around $28-30 million that's still sitting in from bond issues for these types of projects already. So if you take that, and it's going to be going down very, very quickly once those bills start hitting. But once you take that into play, and then you have the next bond issue, you have two things. Because of the breadth, we don't mention projects by name. We just talk about the class. Road acquisition, street widening, public buildings, health and safety issues, those kinds of things. Because it's so broad, if something comes up like you're describing, you can move money within the debt service fund or the project fund at that time. Okay. The other thing is you have other options out there if you are about to run out of those bond proceeds, and all of a sudden you have a big blip that comes up. You can either use your internal funds, but what you do is you make sure you have a reimbursement resolution.
Okay.
And then once you do the next bond issue, you pay back the general fund or whatever source you got it from. Or you could do a bond anticipation note. If it's that big and you don't have the internal funds and you're really having to work your general fund and other sources to take care of current operating needs. So you've got different options out there.
Got it. That's
And
helpful. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
We could do a third takedown of 25 and still be under 15%.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
So
You're welcome.
Here's kind of what I'm seeing, Alderman Linville, and you tell me if I'm off base. This tells us what we can go get without having to really make any decisions. We know Buckner Lane's hanging out there, and we're not going to be able to be real fixed on a project list until that bid is back, hopefully early fall. But certainly between now and early fall, Pam and Ms. Caskey and the rest of staff could put together an analysis of what could be done within the 50. And I would say based upon what that list looks like and the board's appetite to say, you know, that's enough or we want to go bigger, that would then give us some direction on if we want to put together a capital financing resolution and create the debt service fund and start doing some sinking revenues so that we can have a 27, 28, 29 year plan in place that we won't be around to see the finish for.
Right. And I would also, at least in the short term, want to make sure that we know because, you know, if we're looking at, you know, just this year's operating budget or next year's operating budget, like where's the debt service going to come from as far as, you know, operations and like our general fund and all that sort of stuff. Essentially, where are the debt service dollars coming from, right? That would be something that would be important for us to know as well.
We could certainly work on putting all that together for the fall. I think anything in anticipation, anything prior to getting the fall numbers is.
Well, you can put a list together of what we think we might be able to do with 50.
Yeah.
And then when we get a firm number on Buckner Lane, you adjust the list, you put it in front of the board and say, do you want to do this or do you want to think longer term, bigger picture?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, to me, that's a logical,
Yep.
Yeah.
you know, and then we can have arguments about what our priorities are or discussions.
Yeah, the best part about a continuing capital improvement plan is that it is very dynamic, but at least it affords the appropriate conversation that you need to be having. And then once you pull the trigger for one piece of it, at least then you know how the other ones need to fall in line after that.
I mean, look, I'd tell you personally, I'd like to move forward with capital financing resolution, create some debt services funds, and start putting some structure in place that's, you know, going to help the city into the 30s and 40s. But I don't know that there's going to be political will to do that until we know what can and can't be addressed through 50.
Agreed.
Well, I think we've got the system set up so that it won't be that hard. I think we can put that on the agenda for after we get the budget adopted and implemented and all that, start working through that. We'll try to bring you something back in the August BFAC meeting to take a quick look at.
Okay. Alderman Linville, you have anything else?
I do not. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Warner.
John, you're sticking around for the board meeting, correct?
That's what I was going to ask you. Do I?
Yes, please.
Am I invited to that too? Great.
Pardon? Yeah.
Item number 2, discussion fiscal year 22-23 update. Deb?
Can I add to the agenda and ask you to sit back down for just a half a second?
Sure.
New item number 2.
Yeah. Steve Thompson is here with BTA, and I think he's got some adjusted payroll number, personnel numbers, compensation numbers that he wants to talk about tonight based on conversations that you guys have had. And I want to give him a chance to get that to you. It'll be important tonight during the budget discussion. And I have, did I pass those out? Yes. Yeah.
All right. Well, real quickly, this is just another scenario. I guess Pam has put together about, correct me if I'm wrong, Pam, but I guess there's 4 scenarios you want to talk about tonight?
No, I think we just want to talk about the proposed.
Okay, all right. So is this the proposed then?
Is this afternoon?
Yes, yes.
Then yes.
Okay, all right. All right. So basically what we've done is made a couple changes. I think last presentation, we had come up with some numbers that Pam hadn't seen before. I was working feverishly that afternoon to update things, and she hadn't seen the numbers before, so it was a bit of a surprise. So we went back and made some another scenario, and we came full circle now. We're kind of merging the two scenarios together, if you will. So basically what we're proposing here is that all of the pay ranges, if you will, would be moved 2%, except for police. Police, as you can note on this chart, if you look at the line for police and you look at current job market index, it's 91%. So the midpoints, current midpoints for the police jobs, police department jobs, are 9% below market. And we would like to have sound compensation practice based on the design of the pay plan here, is that the midpoints should be tracking the market. So that number should be close to 100%. Well, it's not. So recommendation would be to move those ranges 8% instead of 2%. That would get that number up to 99% there, as you can see. Then after that, we moved all the ranges. We would move all the employees to the minimum for their job. You see the dollar amounts there in the column labeled to a minimum amount. And that represents 108 employees, actually, who would be going to the pay range minimum for their jobs based on the new ranges. Then everybody would get 5%. That's that general increase. That represents a 5% increase. Pam, I did leave in a couple caps that we can deal with. There's a few individuals who were getting like 20% to get to the minimum, and the thought was, that's enough. So there's a few, I'm thinking a dozen at most employees maybe, who maybe 15 or so that would hit some sort of cap. In some cases it's a pretty significant jump already just to get to the minimum. And I cut it off at 8%. So anything above 8% to get to the minimum, they're not going to get anything else. Now we can revisit that as we go forward, but that's in here. So 5% general increase, everybody, and then this tenure increase. We had talked about creating tenure targets within the ranges based on how long individuals have been in the job. And we've been wrestling with dates in job, et cetera, trying to get the correct dates. We think we're close. This may be, I think we'd originally talked that this would be a phase 2 kind of a thing. We would do the 2 minimums and then the general increase first, and maybe do the total, the tenure increase adjustments at a later date, January, next July, whatever. But you can see the numbers there. That's 69 employees would get adjustments based on how long they've been in the job to the tenure-based adjustments that we showed last time, that schedule. And then the total increase is shown here, and then the total increase percentage. And what we get for all of this, it can be summarized in the far right-hand column. These are the benefits, the results, if you will. Employees will now be overall at 106% of the market for their jobs. It varies by department, but most of the departments you can see are in pretty good shape. They're above the average, on the average. Or some employees that are relatively new would be coming in at pay range minimums or shortly, or if they got a couple of years in the job, they'll be somewhere between the minimum and the midpoint. But overall, your salaries would be 106% of the market average. So that's pretty good. Any questions?
Just a note, when I pull the general increase and the minimum amount numbers and pull those together and then multiply by the general fund percentage, actually, you know what? I've got actually general fund right here. No, I don't, because I've got to depend on the 81. Anyway, it turns out to be $138,000 more than we could currently have budgeted in the 950, but that's a far sight better than the number we had with 6%. So I think this is a more amenable number and still gives everybody a pretty healthy.
So there's a gap of 138.
Yeah, we'll need a amendment for the budget to bring to 100 probably 140 would be the safest number.
That'd have to come out of the 507 afloat.
Yeah.
And I would add that, having done this for lots of years in various organizations, usually the budgeted increase is not realized because you have turnover. So people leave, job,
Sure, I understand
and
that.
they get
We're not gonna
they
fill
get replaced by
positions
higher,
immediately on day
lower paid
one.
individuals. So usually that number is inflated. But, there's no guarantees, but I'll just mention that.
Alderman Linville.
Thank you. Biggest question I have is, so from the last one that we saw, the I guess dollar figure to move everyone to the minimum salary at minimum amount was around 360, I think, and now it's 456. I know you explained some things
Mostly
that
in the
changed.
police
Was
department.
that mostly
in the
police?
police, yeah,
Okay.
mostly in the police. Not much else changed. There were a couple jobs that moved here and there, I think, but
Yeah,
it's
there's
mostly
about
police because
70% of it
we,
police.
Yeah. Okay.
the whole, I'm going to say 2/3 were below the minimums,
Okay. Thank you.
or quite close to that anyway.
I mean, we got what? 60% of the final numbers between police and fire.
Yeah.
And of course, when you move the ranges significantly in police, that means looking at those tenure targets, now they are short of the tenure targets because the ranges are higher. So you'll see that the tenure increase number for police went up from like 48,000 to 75,000.
All right, so really this is a board discussion on if we want to take this on or stay with what's in the ordinance, or do we want to digest it for 2 weeks and deal with it on second reading?
Yep.
Anything else? Great. Item number 3, discussion fiscal year 22-23 update. Now, Deb.
Hi, Deborah Dutcher, Finance Director for the City of Spring Hill. In your packets,
Deb, if you just want to roll through items 2, 3, 4, and 5, that'd be fine.
okay, sure. I gave you the financial package in your, financial figures in your package. Right now, we're at year end, so there's a lot of money getting, bills coming in and getting paid. So I know even the numbers I gave you, I looked forward through June, and it's like 10 million more that we've spent than we have here. So as bills get in for that year end, we'll get a better feel of where we are. Bank reconciliation update. We are through December with general fund, and we're through February with water and sewer fund for the big funds. We didn't get a lot of increase work done on this because I had to pull Joseph off to help me with the audits
Good.
information that we had to get.
Pace
to
is
them.
still going the same. He's just been,
Yes, I just pulled him away to work on a do from project, so he'll be gearing up again, because we, as far as the audit today, we sent the auditors the last thing on their list of 120 items. So I'm sure there'll be more questions from them, because that's usual, but at least we have everything to them, which is good. They did put their list, the list that I included with the package on the due dates for the audit were from our auditors. So at this point, they're working on final wrap-up. Hopefully within a week, maybe 2, we'll have the first internal review ready, and then they'll get the drafts to us within the next couple of weeks. The deadline is to have it finished and finalized by June 27th to meet the June 30th deadline, and so we will be on track to do that as far as I know at this point. Let's see.
Alderman Linville, you have anything specific about the audit, or?
No, I was just looking for a general update on the timelines. I think you did.
Pardon?
I said I was just looking for a general update on the timeline, because I know from last meeting we had anticipated potentially taking action on that for the board in June, but it looks like the board action would happen in July based on this timeline. Is that correct?
July would be optimistic, I think.
Okay.
Item number 5, discussion purchase orders and encumbrances.
Okay. We were just talking to the auditors about purchase orders and rolling over from one year to the next. Generally, I've always seen that if a purchase order is issued, it's a contract for that work, and that you just roll that purchase order forward with the funds from the year forward. So we checked with our auditors today, and they said that Spring Hill typically closes all the POs and then issues new POs each year, so that the rolled over POs needed to be added to the budget for the current year. And so we just wanted to bring that up for maybe future consideration.
So last year, we
rolled.
them. And so the idea is that you only have one purchase order number issued for the project. It's kind of odd to issue a contract with a purchase order number and then cancel the purchase order and issue another order. However, I'm not sure we have enough time this year to change the policy. So I think we're looking for direction from you. Do you want us to do what we've done for years, or do you want to try to figure out how to make sure we get it done right and adjust the policy in the past?
I would prefer to roll it. I think closing them and reopening is just creates opportunities for double payments and double invoicing and more opportunities for staff error plus additional staff time.
Okay, so I'm going to put an agenda, I'm going to put a resolution on the agenda for the next meeting that's what we're going to do, and then we're going to give you a roll list, but we're going to author put a policy on to permit that and to make that change. We'll have to clean it up because it's going to be a quick and dirty one, but we've got a whole plan to redo budget and purchasing policies through the summer and fall, so we'll clean that all up afterwards, but it will at least get this memorialized.
Yeah, because closing POs just leaves room for errors, and if they have a PO that's open and you forget to tell them to close it and they give you two of the same item, then we've got a contract. So I think rolling the POs makes a lot more sense. Right. And in the system, it puts R1 next to it, so you know the original one, you know it's been rolled forward. So
Okay.
I think that's...
Item number 6, discussion on utility billing notices.
Okay. One of the things I wanted to ask, I was told that there is no what?
We don't have time for that
Okay,
one.
never
Let's
mind.
get to the next one.
Okay,
because
the next
we have
one's more
to do
important.
that one.
Discussion signatories for Pinnacle Financial Partners Banking Services.
Yes, we have to sign agreements for Pinnacle to start up the new banking relationship. The resolution we did authorized us to pick Pinnacle Financials, but that didn't authorize who to sign the agreement. So we just put a resolution on that the mayor, Pam, and I can sign the agreement so we can get it
All
going.
right, I'm going to move to favorably recommend Resolution 23-106. All those
Okay.
in favor say aye. Passes 2-0.
Okay.
Do you want to get into the 23 budget or the budget number 2 amendment? I think budget number 2 amendment. Okay. We're skipping item number 8. Item number 9, discussion on budget amendment number 2, fiscal year 23. Ms. Kowski.
Yep, you should have at your task a general fund summary budget, plus you had the list of all of the itemized changes. Most of these are recognizing the revenue that we have to send to 1875 that you didn't have authority to do, so that's the 165. We had a number of fleet changes coming in and out. You'll notice that under an increase in their budget and then a decrease in the invoicing. And then you'll have you have all the fleet stuff going in and out. And then you had 2 places where we had just over expenditures that we didn't know where they were going to be able to pull their money from, or they were going to pull it in $5,000 increments, and I just said we're going to put it on the budget amendment.
Okay, so really what this does is fixes the 1875 distribution, restores the fleet department invoicing, and nets us $72,000. Care to recommend on this?
Is there an actual ordinance? I haven't seen like a text ordinance to go along with it.
You're right, you have
Yeah.
not. I'll have to make that happen.
All right.
But
Conceptually, I'm great with it.
The
I just don't know
problem-
what to recommend.
Yeah, shoot, yeah,
All right, well.
That
let's
one's on me.
Wrap up and give you an extra 10 minutes
Yeah.
here. Any items from the floor?
Nothing for me.
Let the record show 5:50, budget meeting adjourned.